Hello and welcome. I originally started taking some photos and posting them on Instagram of the Alfa Romeo build, mainly to keep family and friends up to date on the progress. Since then, I've had a lot of positive feedback from you all, and a lot of people telling me I should try YouTube, so thought I'd give it a go, see how long I stick it out for, hey. I've run into a bit of a problem. I've got the new master cylinder and I've been fitting it up and checking the brake lines, but I've just gone to install the fork that connects it to the pedal. So this essentially threads onto the end of here and the end goes onto the pedal. So when you push the pedal down, this will squeeze in and then that'll compress and send the fluid to the brakes. The issue I've got is the new master cylinder has an M8 by 1.25 thread, whereas the old master cylinder has an M8 by 1 thread, so this won't thread onto the end of the new one. Now I can't change that stud there, so the only other option I've got is to change this thread. Now if I just try and drill and tap that, because it's an M8 thread going to an M8 thread, the pitch is too similar and I won't have any thread left. So the only way to change this is to either cut it off and then weld a new end in and then tap that, or before I go that far, because I've already painted it, I don't really want to do that, I've got another option, which is to helicoil it. Now the way that helicoils work is essentially I drill out the thread that's currently there to a bigger size and then tap that, and it essentially works out roughly to about an M10, and then I'll thread this little spiral, a little spring of steel in there, and then that will be on the inside the right diameter to fit onto the new part. Now helicoils are really common, we use them all the time when you're designing aluminium parts. It's a lot stronger to put a helicoil into an aluminium part than just to thread the aluminium itself. So structurally I got a lot of confidence in it, and yeah, it's a lot easier path to go. If this doesn't work, I can cut the end off of this and then weld a new piece in, but it's painted, let's try and avoid that. Best way to do that then is to get on the lathe. Although I've just realised I don't know how straight that weld is. Maybe the lathe isn't going to work, but we'll try it and see how we go. Okay, if you're trying to lathe something and you've got a finished surface that you don't want to get damaged, here's a good trick. I usually wrap it in paper before putting it in the jaws, that way that you don't get the jaw impressions on your part. The important thing to note is make sure that there's only one layer of paper the whole way around, or two if you do 2 laps. If you have, say, one jaw for example, has got 2 layers of paper, but there's only 1 layer here and here, you're going to offset the part in the lathe and you're basically bringing run out into the part, which you don't want. So if you just check that, what I'd usually do is just kink it at the top here and then put that between 2 of the jaws. You see, that way I know that there's only 1 layer everywhere, it's going to be even. Of course, when you're working on a lathe, never leave the chuck key in. I don't have a stop switch on the guard, so I always use the emergency stop. Now I'm going to check the run out, because this is a welded part here. Sort of expect it to weeble wobble a little bit. Yeah, it's not too bad actually. It's not too bad, I think we'll get away with that. Alright, now with these power coil kits, essentially it comes with a tap and a drill, and they're the right size for this. They're not an actual, like an M10 or a metric size, they're a screw thread insert tap. So this is an M8 by 1.25 STI, which means screw thread insert. Usually taps are denoted by, you know, what the actual finish size is. So if you look at that and you go, oh, that's an M8 by 1.25, that's a trick, careful, I think we've all been done by that before. If you actually measured that, that's going to be much bigger than an M8. So you see the acronym at the end here, it's STI. So that's screw thread insert. Alright, so that's the tap that we'll use. For now, we'll use the correct tapping drill, which is this one. It's an 8.3 tapping drill for this thread. So that also, they come with the kit. They should always come with the helicoil kit if you buy one of those. Alright, so I'm going to put this in here. Now I'm going to go grab some gloves. Should always wear gloves when you're working on anything like this. Safety glasses, of course. Alright, so I've just drilled that out to the correct tapping drill, and now you can tap it. Now there's a couple different ways to do this. I like to do it on the lathe. If you've got a good tailstock, you can just put it straight into the chuck of your tailstock. Otherwise, you can just use a normal a tap set there. So I'm going to try it in the tailstock, but I don't know if I trust this chuck so much. I reckon it's going to spin, but we'll give it a go. Make sure that's nice and tight. Again, e-stop. Make sure you have a gear. For the sake of this one, I think I'm just going to knock that out of gear. Okay. Leave it in the tailstock and then leave the tailstock loose, because that way as you tap it, it can sort of pull itself in. And now I'm just going to turn that by hand. Look at that, that's actually going okay. So, we'll do a little bit of tapping compound. A little bit of cutting oil on there, and then just keep going. So as it gets tight, you can just turn it back and break the thread. Now you can do this and just sort of run the lathe at a slow speed and tap it that way, but for the sake of this particular tap, and the fact that I'm just putting in a drill chuck, I'm not going to do that. You can just break the thread every now and again. There you go. It's actually coming up again. Now it should tap relatively easily. You can see I just turn that by hand without much force. There you go. Simple as that. That's how I tap it on the lathe. Alright, now, so your e-stop's still in, of course. We'll take that piece out of the chuck. Careful not to scratch it. See, if I remove the paper, you sort of see where the jaws bit onto it. There's no damage there, so that's come out well. And it's a nice clean thread. Okay, it's now drilled and tapped. So then the last thing we need to do is to put in the thread set or the helicoil. This is Power Pearl, helicoil. I think they're all just different brand names, but more or less the same product. Okay, so when you use these, as you sort of screw them in, they stretch out. So to set the depth stop, you actually want to sort of let that sit all the way down to the end, and then you set it there. So then as you screw it in, that coil will stretch out, and then it'll keep biting on. If you put it all the way up here, so the tang is only just inside that slot, you'll find you get 2 or 3 turns, and then it will stretch, and then it will no longer engage, and you can't thread it in any further. So what I usually do is I'll just let it sit all the way down there, and then set that like that. Then when you're installing it, you can sort of use that to push up against it, and then turn, and then like as you're constantly sort of pushing on it, it'll make sure that all of the threads engage correctly, and you don't just get, say, one runaway thread, which will sort of skip over 2 threads, as I said, and then that is the worst, because getting these back out once they're installed, you can do it, but it is a real pain. And then you essentially just thread this in like that. So once you find the thread start, you just thread it in like normal until you get to the end. Now the depth stop is good, because sometimes you can find these things sort of stretch out, and that's going to be a real pain in the ass, because if the first thread sort of stretches, it jumps a thread, and then when you go to put the next part into it, you'll find that, I don't know, the end thread's sort of already cross-threaded. The depth stop can help to prevent that, and then I'm just going to thread it in till it's just perfectly flush there. So you can see that last coil just finishes there, just below the surface, and that's flush. But if you look inside it, it's still got that tang. So the way that you work around that is it'll come with this little punch. You just put that in there, get your favourite little hammer, and then you just tap it. There you go. And then that tang will fall right out, and then that's a good, perfectly working thread. So if I've done that well, let's see, it's a good thread on there. Perfect. Cool. Thanks for watching, and I intend to continue using this channel to share little updates of the things I'm working on in the shed, be it progress updates on the car build or any other project I have going on, like the home zinc plating setup I built in order to zinc plate parts for this car. In this time, I also intend to share little tricks and tips of how to overcome problems like we had today, and maybe some little tidbits of things I've learned in my career as an engineer. So if this sounds of interest to you, hit the like and subscribe buttons. If you've got ideas for content that you want to see, then leave a comment or send me a DM. But otherwise, just follow along and we'll see where it takes us. But until next time, thanks again for watching.